I'm Ellie McCauley. I'm a program officer at the National Science Foundation. I work in the Directorate of Education and Human Resources in the Division of Research on Learning within the Advancing Informal STEM Learning program. I'm also the point person for EHR, Education and Human Resources, and the Division of Research on Learning for the NSF Research Coordination Networks. I also work in the Smart and Connected Communities program.
Hi, my name is Monica Cardella. I am also a program director working with the Advancing Informal STEM Learning program. I am a rotator, which means that I am at NSF just temporarily. We do have openings right now. If you might be interested in also serving as a rotator, we'd be happy to chat with you about that and share some information about that. In addition to working with ASL, I work with several other programs in the Division of Research on Learning in Formal and Informal Settings.
Hi, I'm Brandy Hutterson. Can you all hear me? Okay. I'm Brandy Hutterson. I am a AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellow placed at the National Science Foundation. I'm also an assistant professor of biology at the University of District of Columbia. I provide support to the ASL program, and I'm a slave to technology right now, so I'm sitting in my car trying to get the best signal so that I can participate in this office hour session. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I have about 10 slides to share. Are we good, Sasha? Okay, so we're here today, and I recognize that we have also invited anyone who is interested in research coordination networks, not just folks from the ASL community or the informal STEM education community. To look at the overview of the Research Coordination Network solicitation. Now, the first thing to notice is that this Research Coordination Network solicitation is an NSF-wide solicitation. In other words, it is one solicitation that applies to the entire NSF if there are participating programs. Now, EHR, the Education and Human Resources Directorate, has been participating since 2017. We have made very few awards outside of the RCN, Research Coordination Network, in undergraduate biology education, which has its own solicitation within the Research Coordination Network. So this first slide has both links. Unless you're in undergraduate education, the solicitation that applies to you is the first one. Now, a synopsis of the RCN program. The whole goal, this was created in the year 2000 by the Biology Directorate, and the whole goal is to advance a field or create new directions within a field of research or educational research by supporting people who have an interest in a similar topic to coordinate their research, their training, and their educational activities. Now, this also can be across disciplinary, organizational, geographic, or international boundaries. If it's around international boundaries, typically the National Science Foundation pays for the participation of US folks. We may pay for a participation of a couple of other folks, but if it's a lot of international participation, it's typically expected that the US pay for the US components and the international organizations pay for internationals. In any case, it's really to foster new collaborations and to really dig into a topic that more than one group or individual is exploring, and to use that to advance our understanding of that field. So it can also be used to develop networking strategies and collaborative technologies, community standards for data and metadata. So in other words, we have so many researchers and we all operate oftentimes in silos. So building bridges is really at the heart of what a research coordination network is. Now, we recognize there's a tension here. People have to connect enough to be able to put in a proposal to get a research coordination network award. But if you are an existing network that's been going for a while, and you've already been sharing and going, really, you're already established. This is not for you. This is for new and new-ish coordination networks to really start to establish the work and move it forward. So what don't RCNs do? They don't support primary research. They do not support primary research. If you have primary research, great, bring it. Discuss that research, the theoretical perspectives on an issue, your methodological approaches, analyze each other's data. Have participants there, or your target audiences, or your communities that you're collaborating with, and work through the data in different ways. That's all using primary research, but it's not producing primary research. Okay, RCNs share ideas, coordinate, foster synthesis, collaborations, community standards. There's so many things you can do with a research coordination network. And that these coordination networks need to revolve around a theme. They could be a research question. It could be a challenge in the field. It could be a societal issue and taking multiple approaches, or it could be a particular technology or method. So again, like many of the programs at NSF, we are not terribly prescriptive, but you do need to make a case within a general set of guidelines. So RCNs all must have a topic, a reason to be gathering, a principal investigator, a steering committee, network participants, the mechanism by which you will coordinate, what you will share, how you will share it, if there is international participation, and then a management plan, coordination plan, etc. So this is not a standalone, well, it's a standalone solicitation that refers back to other solicitations. When do you know when your proposals are due? The RCN solicitation says, look at the program that you are applying to, and that's the deadline. All right, in terms of the type of award, if you know a lot about awards at NSF, it can be a standard grant or a continuing grant, meaning we can give you all the money up front, or we can give you money over the course of the award, which can be 5 years in total. 15 to 25 awards agency-wide, but that depends on the year. There's not a limit, and there's not a limit or a cap. Also, the money comes from each individual program, and so you're not competing against RCN proposals from across the agency. You're just asking the program you're interested in to fund. This is the amount we expect to spend over the course of a year, but that isn't tied to any one program. We don't make firm commitments. In other words, we have to have proposals that come in that are really good for us to fund them. We're not saying we're going to fund 5 anyway, for example. Now, RCN proposals can be up to 5 years in duration, and their budget should not exceed $500,000 unless you've talked to a program officer and the program officer in the particular program you're interested in applying to has said you can increase that budget. That brings up the point of, if you're going to apply for a research coordination network award, you need to submit a 1-pager to a program officer in advance. And those details are very specifically in the RCN solicitation. Please note that on the back end, on the NSF end, we may get co-funding for your project, but it's got to go into one program for it to be considered. Other things, not surprisingly, universities, college, 2 4-year institutions can apply. Also, nonprofits, non-academic organizations, museums, research labs, etc. can apply as well and be the lead institution. There is only one lead institution. You cannot apply as a collaborative. There has to be one lead institution. You can have subawards, but one lead institution. And there's an organizational limit. Okay, So I want to give 2 examples. This is a little bit clunky the way I have to do it via Zoom. Okay, the first example, a recent award that we made actually this year is developing a network to coordinate research in equity, practices, and cultures in STEM maker education. So I bring this to your attention because we haven't made a lot of awards, so it's at least in education and human resources. So it's exciting when we do. It also provides you an example of what it could look like in the education space. If you look at this abstract, you'll see that basically all 7 components that are required are described here. The goal is to advance, well, they talk about the goal of RCNs. This RCN will bring together scholars and practitioners working at the intersection of equity and interdisciplinary making and STEM education. They go on to describe what making is. They describe why they're choosing equitable processes as one of the organizing themes. And then they talk about what the network will do and what the network will create. In other words, it is completely acceptable, to have products. So for example, the network will create a repository for ethical and promising practices in community-based research and aggregate data across sites, among other activities. So I'm going to move that off for just a moment, and I'm going to show you another one. Another example, now you may recognize this organization. It started off being Bionic, and then it became NABI, and now it is ERIS. So an organization actually arose out of this research coordination network. So this research coordination network, broader impacts and outreach network for institutional collaboration. So how this proposal came about, it basically argues that all NSF proposals are evaluated not only on the intellectual merit of the proposed research, but also on the broader impacts of the work. As such, many institutions have begun employing broader impacts to support professionals, but these individuals have not worked together as a group to identify and share best practices. As a consequence, there has been duplication of effort. So in other words, they've indicated what the issue is that crosses an entire field and what needs to happen. There needs to be coordination. So those are 2 examples. And now those are 2 examples of proposals that have been funded that show that there is a theme, there's a rationale for why it's important, that there are many people or institutions doing the work, that it would make sense for these institutions and organizations to talk about their approaches, what they're finding, how they're finding it, to engage practitioners or community members in the discussion, and then have some kind of dissemination product. I think that's one of the things I didn't mention, is the Bionic, which became NABI, which became ERIS, ended up with a repository and a best practices type of thing. I think that was the project. In any case, EHR, all our divisions participate in research coordination networks. Here is a list of the division point people. If you send something to us, we will take a look at it. We may talk to you, or we may contact one of our colleagues in one of the programs to speak with you. It is absolutely acceptable. I don't know why I'm struggling with that word today, but acceptable to send in your concept to, for example, in the AZLE program, drl@nsf.gov. Carol McGee or Julie Johnson, in our case, would look at the concept and see if it needs to come to me as an overall, or to give it directly to a program officer who would look at it in terms of the content. I do want to mention again that there is a special solicitation, a separate solicitation for RCNs and undergraduate biology education. And that at this point, I would like to call on my colleagues, Monica and then Brandy, to help me out. What have I missed? what should be clarified further, or anything else that you think would help folks before we open it up for questions, both verbally and the chat that Sasha will run.
Yeah, so thank you, Ellen, for that. I think you really explained things well. And I know, though, that this is a lot of information, probably a lot of new information for most people. I think, one of the biggest things is that shift from thinking about the specific project that you're proposing, where you're going to be doing some new thing in terms of practice, and there's this big research piece. And the RCNs are really very different from that, because it's instead focused more on how are you developing new connections, new networks, new collaborations with people, where you're each already working on your own research projects, but at the same time, through this RCN structure, you're able to learn from and with each other. But I just wanted to reiterate that it really is kind of a shift and a different type of proposal from many of our other projects that we fund through AZEL and our other programs in DRL and EHR.
And Brandy, while you cannot speak for NSF because you are a fellow, you sit in on a lot of meetings with us. Do you have other advice from both that inside outside perspective?
I would really just reiterate what Monica said, is that this is it is a different way of looking at these proposals. It is not primary research. There has to be one lead. I think those were the things that I think needed to be repeated and emphasized.
Thank you.